Good evening. The date is February 18th, 2026. We report to you tonight from a Europe that is, well, in flux.
Deeply in flux.
From the frozen expanses of the high north to the crowded diplomatic corridors of Munich, the structural integrity of the post-Second World War order is facing its most severe test.
Maybe ever.
We've just witnessed a fortnight of high-stakes diplomacy, a real fundamental questioning of the transatlantic alliance, and military maneuvering that suggests the old maps of influence. They just don't apply anymore.
The world as it stood for 80 years is under reconstruction. I'm your expert commentator.
And I'm your host. Tonight, we turn our eyes to the European theater to analyze the patterns emerging over just the last 2 weeks.
A lot can happen in 2 weeks.
It certainly can. Before we begin our analysis, a word on the intelligence engine that powers this broadcast. We are supported by ProWave AI, and specifically, the intelligence we are discussing today is generated by Stylo News.
Right.
Now, you might know Stylo as a consumer app on your phone, but it is actually the civilian interface for Stylo Intel Ops.
That's right. It's the software suite used by government agencies, military operations, and enterprise leaders to analyze global patterns and threats.
So what we're doing here is giving you, the listener, access to the same grade of analytical tools that global decision makers use.
We're looking at the raw intelligence to understand the signal within all the noise.
Our mission today is clear.
Yeah.
To unpack the events of early to mid-February 2026. We're talking European defense, the war in Ukraine.
And we're going to look at this without bias, stripping away the fear-mongering to get to the facts.
And frankly, looking at the data we have, the facts are fascinating enough on their own.
They certainly are. And to understand where we are right now, we have to start where everyone else was this past weekend.
Munich.
Munich.
The 62nd Munich Security Conference. It just wrapped up a few days ago, running from February 13th to the 15th. I was looking at the program notes, and the theme this year was incredibly stark. Under destruction. That feels a little dramatic for a diplomatic conference, doesn't it?
It does feel dramatic, but I think honest is probably the better word.
Honest.
Yeah. Under destruction is an acknowledgement that the rules-based order isn't just bending, it's breaking. The consensus coming out of Munich wasn't about saving the old world. It was about surviving the transition to the new one.
So the mood in the hallways wasn't, how do we fix this?
Not at all. It was, how do we not get crushed by what comes next?
Well, one of the people seemingly trying to answer that was German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. He made headlines by declaring the old world order obsolete.
A big statement from a German chancellor.
It is. We've heard tough talk from German leaders before, but is this actually significant or just, a speech for the history books?
No, this is a pivotal moment for German foreign policy. You have to remember for decades, Germany's strategy was, well, it was to do business with everyone and let the Americans handle the security.
Right.
Merz is saying that era is dead. He's arguing that Europe can no longer be a passive beneficiary of American security. His call to action was that Europe must actively shape this new multipolar world.
He proposed a renewed and repaired transatlantic partnership, but there was a key phrase he used.
Mutual strength. He doesn't want dependency anymore.
It wasn't just Germany ringing the alarm bell, though. Mette Frederiksen, the Prime Minister of Denmark, used language that I think shocked a lot of people.
Oh, absolutely.
She warned that if Europe doesn't develop the capability to defend itself, it faces extinction. Extinction. That sounds like sci-fi, not geopolitics.
It's a heavy word, absolutely. But she isn't talking about the physical extinction of the people.
Okay.
She's talking about political extinction. She's responding to a reality where power politics, is dominating international relations again. If Europe is just a rich continent with no army, in this new world, it gets carved up.
And this anxiety is directly linked to what we're hearing from the United States.
Directly.
Let's unpack the U.S. position, because we had some very heavy hitters in Munich representing the administration. We had Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Vice President J.D. Vance.
A powerful delegation.
What was their message to the room?
Their message was consistent with the America First doctrine, but with a specific 2026 flavor. Marco Rubio acknowledged the end of the old world, just like Merz did.
But with a different spin.
A very different spin. His angle was about a reassessment of roles. The U.S. is pivoting, and they aren't being subtle about it.
And we can't ignore the friction regarding Greenland. I mean, President Trump's suggestion to acquire Greenland, that has to make things awkward in the hallways with the Danish delegation, right?
Awkward is putting it mildly. It has significantly strained ties with Denmark, and by extension, the broader alliance. But it serves as a reminder that the U.S. approach is becoming much more transactional.
And Vice President Vance was critical of European policies.
Very critical, emphasizing that the U.S. security guarantee isn't a blank check anymore. If you want American protection, the price is going up.
This leads us directly into the core conflict we are seeing in the data. This tug of war between traditional Atlanticism
Rely on the U.S.
and this new buzzword, European strategic autonomy.
Or, as Elbridge Colby, the U.S. Deputy Secretary of Defense, calls it, NATO 3.0.
Now, help me out here. What exactly is NATO 3.0? Is this just a branding update?
That's a great question. Think of NATO 1.0 as the Cold War, and NATO 2.0 as, say, the War on Terror and Crisis Management.
Okay.
NATO 3.0, in Colby's view, is a return to realistic power politics where Europe takes primary responsibility for its own defense. It's the U.S. saying, we have to focus on the Indo-Pacific and China. Europe, you handle your own backyard.
So practically speaking, what does that look like?
It's not just rhetoric. We're seeing the transfer of command for key NATO headquarters in Europe to European officers.
Wait, so actual operational control is changing hands?
Yes.
That sounds like a massive logistical shift. Can the European command structures handle that kind of real-time pressure without the Pentagon holding their hand?
That is the multi-billion-dollar question. The U.S. is signaling that they will provide the nuclear umbrella and high-end support satellites, intelligence, but the conventional defense.
The tanks on the ground, the infantry.
That is becoming a European responsibility, and frankly, the European officers are scrambling to make sure they can actually execute those engagement protocols without calling Washington first.
And speaking of that nuclear umbrella, that brings us to the nuclear question. This used to be a taboo subject in many parts of Europe.
And now it's resurfacing everywhere. It's the logical conclusion of doubting the U.S. guarantee. If you can't rely on Washington 100%, who provides the ultimate deterrent?
President Macron of France has been very vocal.
Very. He's been discussing the extension of France's nuclear umbrella to its allies.
But here is where it gets surprising for me. We saw a report from TV4 Nyheterna in Sweden, a country that was neutral for centuries until very recently.
It's amazing.
They are seeing public support for national nuclear deterrence.
That is a massive shift in the Scandinavian psyche. It speaks to the level of security anxiety. When the Swedish public, who historically championed disarmament, is considering nuclear options, you know the feeling of safety has evaporated.
They're looking at the map.
They're looking at the map, looking at Russia, and thinking, we might need the ultimate insurance policy.
Amidst all this, we have the United Kingdom trying to find its footing post-Brexit. Prime Minister Keir Starmer made a significant speech at Munich. What's the UK's play here?
Starmer is playing a very specific role. He is calling for stronger UK-EU defense cooperation. He's moving away from that post-Brexit fragmentation where everyone did their own thing.
And the UK is looking at participating in the Safe Defense Fund.
That's right.
Sorry to interrupt, but you mentioned the SAFE Fund. I've seen that acronym floating around. What exactly is that?
Right. So SAFE stands for the Strategic Autonomy Fund for Europe. Think of it as a massive pooled bank account designed to bypass the usual slow EU bureaucracy.
Oh, okay.
It allows countries, including the UK in this case, to jointly buy weapons and invest in technology much faster than before. Starmer realizes that even if the UK isn't in the EU, its defense is inseparable from the continent. He's trying to bridge that gap.
So we have the political rhetoric in Munich. We have the funding mechanisms like SAFE. Now let's look at the operational reality, what is actually happening on the ground, or the ice, as it were.
Literally and geopolitically, yes.
The Arctic seems to be heating up.
It is. Just around February 12th and 15th, NATO launched the Arctic Sentinel operation.
I saw a headline about Arctic Guardian, too. Is that the same mission, or are we looking at two different operations here?
It's the same operation. Different translation sources are using slightly different names, but the mission is identical. It's a major naval and air deployment to counter Russian and Chinese influence in the high north.
Why the Arctic? Why now?
Because as the ice melts, new shipping lanes open up and resources become accessible. China wants in, and Russia considers it their front yard.
And the Russians are not happy.
Of course not. Ambassador Denis Gonchar accused NATO of militarizing the Arctic. But from NATO's perspective, they have to secure that northern flank or they leave a back door open to the Atlantic.
Let's move south to Ukraine. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte visited Kiev on February 3rd, Plenty of photos of him shaking hands, reaffirming support after those missile attacks.
A lot of diplomatic support, yes.
But the numbers tell a worrying story. I was reading about a scaling down of peacekeeping contingents.
This is where the rubber meets the road, and the road is full of potholes. This is the operational reality checking the political ambition.
So what's the plan?
Europe had initial plans on paper for maybe 80,000 peacekeeping troops to secure a potential ceasefire line. Now, we're looking at a monitoring mission of maybe 5,000 to 10,000.
Wait, 80,000 down to 5,000? That's not a scaling down, that's a collapse.
It is a massive reduction. And the reason is simple: troop shortages. Europe simply doesn't have the manpower ready to deploy at that scale yet. They can write the check, but they can't field the boots.
And meanwhile, the other side isn't sitting still. We have a report from the Estonian Foreign Intelligence Service
And those guys are usually spot on regarding Russia.
saying that Russia is actively reorganizing.
That report is chilling. It suggests Russia is restructuring its military specifically to delay European capabilities. They are looking at Europe's production timelines and trying to disrupt them. It's a long game.
However, there is a flip side to this militarization. The business of defense is booming. Stylo News pulled a data point that I found staggering.
Yeah.
$8.7 billion invested in European defense startups in 2025.
That's a 55% increase. It's huge.
And it's not just the big established contractors like Airbus or BAE. We're talking startups.
Exactly. The UK, Germany, and Eastern Europe are leading this. It's driven by the war in Ukraine, the need for drones, advanced surveillance, AI. The market is responding to the threat even faster than the bureaucracies are.
It's like Silicon Valley has moved to the eastern flank.
In a way, yes. Innovation is becoming a survival mechanism.
So we have external threats, a shifting alliance, a startup boom. But we also have to talk about the internal front. Because it's easy to look at these charts and say, Europe is rearming. But that assumes Europe is acting as one single unit. When you zoom in on the politics, that unity starts to look a lot more fragile.
It does. Europe is hardly a monolith. You have a very distinct fracture point in Hungary. Viktor Orban has been ramping up the hostile rhetoric toward Ukraine, labeling them an enemy regarding energy transit,
And maintaining that pro-Russian stance.
despite all the pressure from Brussels.
And interestingly, Secretary of State Rubio visited Hungary and Slovakia recently. Why go there?
That was a very calculated move. Rubio visiting Orban signals that the U.S. under this administration is willing to work with specific conservative governments that align with their worldview, essentially bypassing the Brussels consensus.
Contrast that with the North.
Completely different story. Sweden, Finland, Norway, Denmark, they are moving toward deep defense integration, shared command structures, shared air forces. They aren't waiting for NATO or the EU. They are locking shields because they feel the threat directly.
We also have some breaking news that came in around February 15th regarding Alexei Navalny.
Yes. New European findings regarding his poisoning have been released. This has triggered widespread condemnation from Berlin, London, Milan.
Moscow, of course, denies everything.
As expected, but it has spiked diplomatic tensions right in the middle of all this other maneuvering. It just adds another layer of ice to the relationship.
We ran a Stylo analysis on social media sentiment regarding all of this. I'm curious, what does the average European citizen think? Are they ready for NATO 3.0?
It's a mix of anxiety and, I'd say, resignation. There is high concern about the reliability of U.S. security guarantees. People feel the shift, they see the headlines.
But are they on board with the cost?
Well, interestingly, there's a growing trend supporting European strategic autonomy, especially in Western Europe. It's not necessarily because they want to spend the money on tanks, but because they feel they have no choice.
And then you have skepticism.
Yeah.
We saw sources like blocknot.uu portraying European leadership as all talk and no bite.
Which brings us back to that gap between rhetoric and capability. Can they actually deliver the 80,000 troops? Or are they stuck at 5,000? That's what the critics are latching onto.
So what does this all mean for the immediate future? If I'm a listener trying to figure out where this is going next month, what should I be watching?
Well, watch the Ramstein meetings coming up. That is where NATO 3.0 moves from a concept to a checklist. We need to see how they actually implement these command transfers.
And we are waiting on a major speech from the French presidency, right?
Yes, on nuclear doctrine. If France formally offers a security guarantee to its neighbors, putting it in writing, that changes the fundamental architecture of European security.
It would be a historic shift.
Absolutely.
And of course, the peace negotiations. There are talks involving the U.S. aimed at ceasefire mechanisms for Ukraine.
Those will be critical. If the U.S. pushes a deal that Europe or Ukraine isn't ready for, it could fracture the alliance even further.
If you had to summarize the proposed courses of action here, what are the experts saying needs to happen?
For Europe, it's about acceleration. They need to accelerate the safe fund and industrial integration. They have the money, but they don't have the unified market to fix the troop and equipment shortages fast enough.
They need to treat this like an emergency, not a policy debate.
Exactly.
And for the United States,
It's a balancing act. They are pivoting to Asia. That's happening. That's real. But they need to maintain enough influence in Europe to prevent total fragmentation. If NATO falls apart completely, that doesn't actually help American interests.
they want Europe to carry the burden, not to collapse under it.
Precisely.
It feels like we are walking a tightrope without a net.
We are. The training wheels are off. The next 6 months will determine if the bike stays upright.
That is a sobering thought to end on. But before we go, I want to pivot back to how we gathered all this intelligence. We mentioned Stylo News at the top.
Right. And a specific feature I want to highlight is the location AI bot and the pattern of life analysis.
That sounds incredibly technical. Can you break that down for us non-spies?
Mhm.
What is a pattern of life analysis?
Sure. Think of it like this. The AI looks at normal behavior in a region traffic flow, radio signals, economic activity. That's the pattern of life.
Okay, the baseline.
Exactly. When something deviates from that, say a sudden spike in radio traffic in the Arctic or a convoy moving where there shouldn't be one, the AI flags it. It's how we knew the Arctic buildup was likely happening before the official press releases came out.
And this is accessible to anyone.
Yes. It's a mobile and computer app. You can get personal intelligence-style briefs from hundreds of traditional sources, and even X, formerly Twitter, it curates it all so you aren't doom-scrolling, you're analyzing.
If you want to get AI-powered news on demand and see these patterns for yourself, you can subscribe at www.stylonews.com.
It's definitely worth checking out if you want to stay ahead of the curve.
Well, that wraps up this deep dive. A huge thank you to everyone listening. We know these topics can be dense, NATO 3.0, safe funds, nuclear doctrines, but they impact the world we live in every single day.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
If there is a specific topic you want us to cover in a future deep dive, maybe something on the Indo-Pacific pivot or the specifics of that defense startup, boom, let us know on social media. Follow Stylo News on your favorite platform and drop us a line.
Stay curious.
And stay informed.
Yes.
Goodbye for now.